Hi everyone, you're listening to First Gen Second Thoughts. Welcome back, or if this is your first time listening, welcome. I'm Arishma, your co-host.
I'm Raja, your other co-host. This is a podcast about two humans trying to heal, who also happen to be married. We're hoping to build a community of other humans who can resonate with any part of us or our story.
Everyone deserves to live a happy, healthy, and healed life, and we've learned that therapy can help with that.
In today's episode, we are talking about addiction.
Yeah.
A very relieving sigh in some senses.
And we figured to first actually cover what addiction actually is and defined as in our new segment called Word to the Wise. So, addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite adverse consequences. It's considered a brain disorder because it involves functional changes to brain circuits involved in reward, stress, and self-control.
Man, just that last part of that explanation helps give light to others that are struggling with addiction. It really does, that brain disorder that you mentioned. It's sad. And it's heavy.
Yeah, and it's a very destructive disease at the end of the day when you boil it all down, which is really tough.
Yeah, a disease indeed. Well, I will kick things off with addiction. My father struggled with alcohol and gambling addiction specifically. It's quite the combo when you think about it. It's a fire that continues to fuel itself. And like fire, it spreads wildly. Especially when you're living under the same roof as someone who's struggling with addiction of those two type of calibers. For me, it was always when sunset and dusk begins to hit, I used to become very hyper aware of just the evening and panning out and trying to read the room if people were going to lose their lid based off of how their day went, because that's how it was with me and my dad a lot of the times. Yeah, so just to paint the picture, it would be dusk. That would get me on eggshells already, because that was the cue of when my dad started to pour himself a drink. And it wasn't just a drink, it was a shot of whiskey and a mixed drink after that. And if it was a bad day, it would be up to 2 to 3 shots and then a mixed drink. Yeah, and just the pop and the fizz of him opening the soda, or like hearing the psst from like the bottles itself, terrifying. Oh damn, I'm getting chills. And like the clinking of like the ice in the glass, just all those things. It really instilled like a lot of fear, because I didn't know. Well, I knew what was coming, but it was like, to what degree of chaos is coming my way, right? And that was my dad on a regular, on like an every single day basis. I'm not saying like my dad just had a drink like that once a week. It was every single day. And it didn't just start after mom passed away either. It was always there. I believe the gambling and the drinking. And I think it was mom that kind of kept it in line and in check.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, dad still would get unbearably drunk at like family gatherings or family events. I remember like mom being alive too around that time. Everybody knew my dad was just a drunk. Like, always had to lie to like people to be like, no, that's not really him.
Oh, to defend him in a sense? Okay.
It's like Stockholm syndrome when you think about it.
Well, I just to like double click into there, like I would be interested to really figure that part out, because they're still your parent, right? So you're biologically and neurologically wired to see them in the best light possible, especially when you're a child and you're dependent upon them for survival. You know? If he had more to drink, was his behavior worse, or was it just the same severity every single night?
There was a baseline of severity.
Okay.
But as he continued to drink, it would get worse. First, it'd be about his day, and then it would turn into some stuff about me, and then it would turn into something about money, and then that's when the gambling thing would kind of come up and stuff. After that, it would go back to like people in the family he didn't like, and then being so young, it's kind of like, okay, I know none of this is true, but why does my dad believe it's so true? Maybe parts of it are true, right? Because you constantly just beating it in my head about, you know, your aunt and uncle are bad people, your sisters are bad people, you're a bad person.
Yeah.
It's just like,
especially when you're the teenager who is figuring out their identity. You're in the very primitive forms of defining who you are. And yeah, like whatever you hear from others, like you become hypersensitive to it and you absorb it.
That's a good point.
But yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're fine. But yeah, going back to like mom putting him in check for his habits is what they would say in our culture. It as an actual problem that because and going back to the dinner table with my dad, I remember asking him, I was like, so why do you drink? What is it about drinking? And his reply was that it is my fashion. Never understood it.
I think it's like slang, right? It's like my signature thing to do.
Yeah, but it's not like a good one.
I know. In no way am I trying to defend his action.
He continued to drink after mom died. It just got worse. He found coping with the bottle, which I understood then, and I think I did a little too well as a kid. Because having to grow up after such a traumatic event and then realizing that, the parent that's supposed to be in charge can't even take care of himself, therefore I have to just grow up.
Yeah, you're parentified and adultified, like, very quickly.
Right.
And that's of a parent.
As the child being parentified and feeling this obligation to take care of my dad.
And also to add in the layer, like, you had already lost mom by this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I lost mom when I was 8, and dad lost his mind, and he found the bottle. I get why he went down that route.
It sounds like you understand him as a human, but as his son, like, that is extremely painful.
Yeah, because I had to humanize him. It wasn't until... It wasn't until my eldest sister was getting married and dad's mom flew from India to, for the wedding. We're celebrating Mother's Day. Grandma's at the house and dad, me, my Chachaji, my dad's younger brother and his family. And, celebrating Mother's Day. And my dad turns to me like in the middle of the day, like while we're celebrating everything. He's like, oh my gosh, this must be really hard for you. And I'm like, Dad, 18, what are you talking about? It's been hard for the past 10 goddamn years.
And it just dawned on him. The self-absorption, right?
My dad has very narcissistic tendencies as well, which, again, we will dive into something else in the next episode. Like the lack of empathy to your own kid. The lack of trying to see the world through your kid's eyes. Yeah. That was really hard to get out.
Because you have a kid.
Yeah.
And you do that for our kid. And that wasn't done for you as a child. That's hard.
It was hard. It's hard to even, think about, surviving that. And then my dad's gambling was a whole different beast. Which were just openly lying about our finances. Him manipulating me with money that I would earn when I had a job.
How so?
When I first got a job and I used to work in fast food. It was one of my first jobs out of high school.
Rite of passage.
Right. So work food industry for sure. He took me to the bank and was like, okay, well, we're going to, you're going to open up a bank account, but I'm going to be joint on it. And I'm like, what?
Huh.
Why? And he was like, so I can help fund your finances and this and that. And I was like, fund it? You can still fund it without being a part of my bank account, fool.
Yeah.
And I was only 18 at the time, so I was like, I know that I can have my own.
Yeah, legally.
Yeah, legally. So I was like, because I am working legally now. So I was like, I don't know about that one. And I remember he took me, and the banker was just talking to me because he was like, we're making you an account.
Yeah.
And dad trying to wedge himself in, and me being like, I got this. Like, thank you, but no, right? But me seeing him, trying to be a parent, but me knowing now that he was just trying to have control over my funds.
I didn't realize that was something that had happened.
Yeah.
Wait, so, if I can't ask, how did you actually, not make that happen? So, what did you actually have to say to him for him to, back off? Because what I know of your dad's addiction and gambling, it was very persistent. I think I'm trying to figure out how you were able to kill the persistence in the room with him.
Oh, I just asked, is my dad necessary to have this account? And he was like, no, you're 18, right? And I was like, yeah. I was like, it's my birthday, my social, all the things. And the guy was like, no, it's your choice.
And then what was your dad's reaction?
He was just kind of sitting there uncomfortable and me just taking the reins of it because I'm opening my own bank account because I have a job.
So he didn't fight you on it at all?
So that would be considered a bad day for my dad, right? Because he didn't get what he wanted. And yeah, dinner that night was me realizing like, hey, I can get out of the house more because I have a job now, right? Oh, and a little tidbit was that I was always an AB student, but I still went to summer school. Why, you ask? So I can get out of the damn house and get away from my dad. Because of the drinking, because of the chaos, because of the nonsense, because of the gambling. Yeah, we have dinner, and Dad was upset that he, his joint plan thing didn't work, and me asking him, like, well, what's the big deal, right? It's like, I don't have access to your funds.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then he didn't like none of that. He didn't like anything I got to say a lot of the times. And then, and so here we go. Two shots right before dinner, and then his mixed drink, and just being like, you know what your problem is?
Goodness,
Essentially, you think you're a smart ass. And I'm like, okay, hi. Like,
jeez, okay.
This is how we're starting dinner? Okay, cool. Okay. You just think you know everything, don't you? And I'm like, no, but I have a good, clear idea of what I don't want to do. And this is it. And getting a joint bank account with you is not something I want to do. In my head.
Yeah.
Because again, most of the time I just kept my mouth shut because it was better that way. Because then he can just vent and rant and all the things. And then I can get to bed by 11 p.m. You think you know everything. You think like you have it all figured out. You don't know how hard life is and blah, blah. And just gaslighting me and scaring me. And I realized that was one of the ways that he was trying to feed his gambling addiction.
So he needed you more than you needed him at that point.
Oh, yeah. When we moved from San Jose to Modesto, Dad, he sold the house for pretty good money. And the cost of living in Modesto was a lot cheaper. And once we moved, he started a college savings for me, right? And it wasn't until we moved that my dad told me that my sister was in need of a car, which they both lived in San Francisco at the time. And I was like, okay, what does that have to do with me? And him being like, well, as her father figure, I want to get her a car, but I don't have the money. But we do have money with your savings.
Oh, boy.
And me being like, okay, and Dad trying to make a peace deal of, we'll use that now, and then there'll be more money coming later, but never saying from where.
Yeah.
Putting it all together, and me just being like, you know what, you're going to do it anyways. And saying, yeah, okay, fine. And even at that age, I knew. I was like, I knew.
You knew that it wasn't going where he said it was going?
Not all of it. He did get a car for my sister, but even she was like, yeah, but I was saving money myself. I was just telling Dad, like, that's what I was working on at the time.
Yeah.
Him feeling obligated to be like, no, I have to get her a car now, right? Which was a total facade. So he can have those funds and just put a little bit towards the car, and then the rest of it would fuel his gambling addiction.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was really bad.
Yeah.
And so that scarcity mindset is something that I used to struggle with a lot. I know that it kind of seeps in from time to time with certain things for me. Yeah, it was painful because it was years of that kind of stuff and years of me trying to help my dad.
Yeah.
And going into the humanity side of addiction is that brain disorder that you mentioned.
Yeah, it's a brain disorder because it involves functional changes to brain circuits involved in reward, stress, and self-control.
And so, yeah, and like for my dad, he started abusing alcohol at a really young age.
How young are we talking about?
I want to say like late high school.
Like 16. Oh gosh, yeah, your development is like very rapid.
So you add that, mix in some gambling and this concept of like friends till the end because family is too strict. I bring that up because my dad was a black sheep of the family. So he always found refuge in quote unquote his friends, even though they were just bad news all the time, even as an adult in America.
Okay, there's a little bit of a lack of judgment of character.
It wasn't until I was much older and I saw my nieces and nephews turn 8 years old and realizing how small I was when my mom passed away and how parentified I was when my dad just went off the handles. Yeah, a lot of stories that I'll share in future episodes, but I feel like just sticking with the addiction and the definitions and stuff is good for right now.
Okay. How do you feel you observing your dad struggle with addiction in the forms of gambling and alcohol abuse? How do you think that shaped you, what you you think was a direct impact of his alcoholism on you, and like how it shaped your habits, or like even your view of substances.
Oh, I hated it. Yeah, I didn't drink until I was actually 21, out of all things. And that was at a bowling alley. It was my friend Kevin, God rest his soul. He was the one that was like, "Hey, I'm gonna get a picture because you're 21 now." And I was like, "All right, cool." And that was like one of the first times like I had like alcohol. It was at a bowling alley
With your friends who apparently were responsible.
Oh, very responsible. Yeah, very responsible. A great set of friends. And yeah, I tried just to not associate myself with it for such a long time. Even my friends would experiment with like marijuana and stuff in high school, and I didn't want to partake because I was scared of what my reaction would be, because I saw like the substance intake from my dad and just saw how he always like lost his mind essentially, and me being fearful like that might be a genetic thing and that could be me, and I don't want to do that in front of my friends.
Well, you know, like addiction, if it runs in your family, you actually technically are predisposed to it. However, your reaction of being under the influence can vary, of course. Yeah. But yeah, I can imagine like how terrifying it was to watch your dad, and even to like meet that to any degree, even if it's a small degree, like how scary that can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like not wanting to take the risk of finding out.
Yeah, I didn't want to lose my friends.
No,
so
I get that.
That's why I didn't bother. I mean, I still hung out with them after they did their things and stuff, but
I'm really sorry you had to experience that stuff.
You know, me too. Me too. It was a lot just having to think about that, and like that's the role model of a father figure that I had, and only to be a dad now. It's like, thanks for showing me what not to do. Even though it's pretty clear that you don't do those things, period. Also accepting of how unfair life was.
Yeah, that's very true. You know, as your partner, I'll be honest, it's very refreshing to hear you say that, because when we met, the phrase you always use was, well, these are the cards I just was dealt. And it's like, true, there is a degree of truth in that too, but those were very unfair cards. You can be accepting of it, but you don't have to be okay with it necessarily. Yeah, because then you're kind of denying yourself how traumatic that was and the ways it shaped you. And yeah, when you're in that denial phase, you can't see any of that for yourself.
Yeah, and that piece that you just shared, that you can accept it, you don't have to be okay with it. I don't think a lot of people understand that. I think when they hear, oh, I've accepted it, it's like, I've okayed it, I've healed it, I've moved past it. Like, that is the cascading flow of accepting something and then it being quote-unquote okay. I don't think people understand that it's okay to not be okay, but you can still accept the outcomes that have happened in life.
Yeah. It's me. I was people at one point. I think I share that because I now understand that two things can be true at the same time, and two opposing things can be true at the same time. Life, if anything, it's duality. Like yin and yang is very much so true.
Yeah. Was that connection not a thing? Or did you already know somewhere along the lines that like, I can accept these things, but I don't have to be okay about it?
I think I had to learn how to express that. I think internally and innately, I felt that pretty much my entire life, where it's like, yeah, that happened. I understand that it happened. I accept that happened, but it still hurts. I grew up in a household of extremes. So when you're holding two truths at the same time, that's kind of being in the middle or floating in the gray, and that just wasn't a possibility for me.
Like how were you able to bookmark your feelings during that process? Because you had a feeling, but you knew you couldn't share it. You knew like whatever was happening wasn't right.
Yeah. I didn't bookmark it. I was told to shove it away. My feelings didn't matter. My feelings didn't exist. They weren't valid.
Okay.
Yeah. Which probably is like what actually drove me to the point of like this whole idea of accepting that something happened but not being okay with it a lot faster, because the moment I realized my feelings were real, valid, I just needed that one piece of confirmation of like, no, girl, that's a real thing. That's valid. And then, yeah, I took that and ran with it. And like, it's been very freeing, I will say. Yeah.
Very cool.
It's been a process of unburdening there, but yeah.
And what was the concept of addiction in your family growing up?
That's a good question. So it's ironic because you mentioned your dad's drinking being described as like a quote unquote habit. that he had, but like in my family, similarly enough, it was something that folks called quote unquote bad habits. So I don't know if that's any better or worse.
Cue Ed Sheeran. That's a really good song.
What, like, how it was framed to me. And then as I got older, I realized, oh gosh, no, that's addiction. These people, you know, are struggling. And I will share, you know, my maternal grandfather, so my mom's dad, God rest his soul, he was always described as being someone who was a quote unquote fan of his drink, and that, you know, he drank pretty heavily and that he wasn't able to be a present father because of it. And interestingly enough, I noticed that it was always my mom and her sisters, so my aunts, my mussies, my maternal aunts, who would talk about Nana like that. And I don't think I've ever heard any of my mom's brothers mention about my Nana's drinking habits.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure like why that is. It may just be a symptom of the relationships that I have with my aunts, because I feel like I talk to them more frequently than I do my uncles. I think, unfortunately, there's probably a degree of alcoholism there for my Nana. I wasn't there when it was happening, of course, so I don't know how severe it was for him. And then on my dad's side, he has a brother who passed away like tragically young. And it was pretty widely known that he abused substances in general when they were in Fiji. And he was also, in the same breath, always described as being the smartest one in the family. And that makes me incredibly sad, because I wonder if there were struggles within him that he just didn't have the tools to talk about, or maybe struggled to even identify the fact that they were struggles, because he was unfortunately also known to be physically violent. Like, he would have spells of that. And I'll always wonder, like, was there some mental illness? Was there neurodivergence involved? Like, what kind of trauma did he have, did he hold within himself so deeply that it would manifest in physical violence? And then coupling that with addiction, and to see him have passed so young, it just makes me really sad, because everyone deserves a happy, healthy life, and he just didn't have the resources to do so. Our family struggles with addiction, and my dad was never a consistent drinker, but like when we would go to family parties and stuff, sometimes he would have a little too much to drink. And that was, of course, concerning. And now thinking back about it, like, I see how my Nana's dependency on alcohol traumatized my mom, because when my dad would get drunk at family parties, she would still make him drive us home.
Oh, sorry, say that again?
Yeah, and this is not a family secret. Like, she would tell people, okay, like when he would get drunk, I would make him drive us home still. And it was, I guess, in the efforts to teach him a lesson of like, well, if we die, it's your fault.
Okay.
And that's sad, because her inner child ever processed or acknowledged or recovered from seeing what she saw from her own dad. And there were times where Nana, she, typically would say, like, he wasn't a present dad, but he was a really good grandfather. I also wonder, like, what did my Nana battle inside that we have no idea about? That's unfair to him. It's me having been in therapy now for a few years, like, I understand how not having an outlet or not having community to lean on and talk about, like, your thoughts and feelings with, it really, like, opens the door to substance abuse and addiction. And just sometimes, like, you're just trying to shut the noise out, or you're trying to go numb, and which is why I'm a really, really big advocate for therapy. And I understand, like, every once in a while you just want to unwind with a cocktail or a glass of wine. I get that. I really do. But I'd rather talk to my therapist for an hour.
You gotta exercise the demons.
Yeah.
That's really it.
And now, like, with us having a child, like, I do think deeply about how we're gonna have to have the conversation of, like, substances and the fact that addiction runs in our family, and like how mom and dad, meaning you and I, like, have different habits, because we're very aware of how it can show up in us and that we're predisposed to all those things. I think about it because those conversations weren't had with me.
Yeah, you were expected to be an adult as a kid.
Yeah, I was in a house living with 3 other adults, and they all just assumed I knew what they knew.
Which is really unfair.
Yeah.
But I also feel like a very common thing with immigrant parents.
And then I also, in very much so real time, I have a family member who is struggling with it currently, and it's tough. Like me now being kind of in the position where my dad was at one point, or my mom was at one point, and watching loved ones go through addiction from like such a close proximity. It's hard because like, if I could do the work for them to help them break the habit and get the help that they need, I would do it in a heartbeat. I would do it just to like make it pass quicker for them. But I have learned in very recent times that like, I just can't. That's not how it works. And it is the most painful thing because, of course, like I want them to be okay. I pray for them to be okay. And I know they will be okay, but it's going to take a lot of time. And that's the part that really sucks. I'll even share very like transparently. For me, in my experience, in like flying a little too close to the sun of addiction, when I was in college, I had mentioned previously, like in a past episode, like I found myself coping with alcohol, and that was scary. I was very fortunate to wake up one day and be like, I need help, and that this doesn't make me feel good, and something somewhere has got to give. And it actually made me quit drinking. Like I went cold turkey. I think I was young enough to do that. I think my brain could handle it. I don't think I necessarily experienced withdrawals because I was so distracted with like everything else, like trying to graduate, and then being on the job hunt. Like I didn't have time. Like it wasn't a priority once I recognized it wasn't helping me anymore. And I think ever since then, I've always had a very distant relationship with alcohol or substances in general, just because I didn't want to try it again. I'm a parent now, so like who has the time to sit down and enjoy, excuse me, a glass of anything? And I just don't really care for it. And now having, gone through therapy for a few years, it's made me like realize and see the humanity in others that like I've seen struggle with addiction. Like when you don't have a healthy outlet or a way to cope with your emotions or just life in general, I can see how if you're predisposed to addiction, how quickly you can go down that path.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. And I think about that often. Like everyone's life has their trials and tribulations, of course. And like I think about it in my own personal context. Like I do wonder, like, what was it in me that was just like, nope, not doing this anymore. And like, I've had, of course, many tough times after that point in college, but I've never leaned on substances to help me cope. And it also has made me realize like how easily misunderstood people can be because you just see them in their quote unquote bad habits. But if you go 1 or 2 layers deeper, you realize like they're really just struggling. Like they don't have the help and the support that they actually need, and they probably don't even know how to get it. So who's offering it to them? And especially like thinking about the fact that my parents and before them, they all grew up in a third world country, and how taboo it was to even like try to talk about your feelings, let alone go to therapy. And it was like, I guess the more quote unquote masculine to do was just to drink your worries away. Like it takes so many generations for your bloodline to recover from that. Like truly, like when you think
that's
about
a good way of saying that. Yeah. Generations of healing just from addiction alone.
Yeah.
I guess another good question is, when is it coping versus when is it an addiction?
That's it, man.
Because I know like after mom passed away, for me, I coped with food a lot.
Yeah, addiction does show up in other forms versus gambling and substance abuse and such. Yeah, you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'd find myself just eating anything that I could, and whatever was in the pantry. There used to be like a 5-pound bag of tortilla chips or something you can get from like Pack and Save or like Safe or something.
Yeah, even Costco.
Like
it comes up to your hip. Yeah.
Yeah, it was as big as me at a certain point. And yeah, I just remember eating those just mindlessly because I didn't know what to do. Again, processing mom's death and then still having to like think about school and having that pressure of just going to school. in the second, third grade and trying to figure out all that. But then you add dad's chaos to it, and okay, he's not even fit to take care of himself. Therefore, he's not fit to take care of us, and us, me and my sister living with family members because dad was absent. And that's the gambling part, because that's what he was doing, because there was money after mom passed away, but him not having the wherewithal to like do something good with it other than thinking that he can just get rich by gambling it all.
He wasn't able to reason with the reward part of his brain.
And then you couple that with just having really bad friends, and you surround yourself with them. And the cycle just continues. Again, it's a nasty, like, dirty dancing kind of tango, gambling and alcoholism. Because I'm still trying to make sense of it, even as an adult now. It's crazy.
That is really difficult.
But going back to like coping with food is how I did cope with a lot of things growing up. Yeah, and we weren't even sure of like where we were gonna stay some nights because of how frequent dad would just go missing.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to like summarize how the types of addiction I see in my parents, and because it definitely does run in my family. And I think with my mom, it's like shopping, you know, and just that like rush of having this material thing gratify her. And I interwoven with the scarcity mindset, because for a lot of our boomer immigrant parents, like the more stuff you have, the safer you feel, because that's a physical representation of your finances. I feel like I'm averse, and sometimes I overcorrect when it comes to material things. Right now, I will say like we're in the middle of decluttering our whole house.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, and it feels great. Don't get me wrong. And like a lot of the stuff that like we've come across, it's like stuff we've had for years and we just haven't thought about, but we didn't buy just to buy, you know? But that's why I say like overcorrecting, because if I haven't used something in 6 months, it's most likely going to get donated. And if I realize I need it in the future, I will most likely just buy it again. And it's because for me, a painful lesson is a lesson learned. And if I have to buy it the second time, that means that like it needs to have an accessible home. With us decluttering, like it started with me saying, okay, I'm just going to start with one shelf in our pantry. And we don't have a walk-in pantry, mind you, because our pantry was a disaster. And I get it, pantries, like, that's the one thing that you use, like, literally multiple times a day, right? And also we have a toddler, so she likes a variety of snacks. She gets that from her parents.
You're welcome, sweetheart. Love you.
Yeah.
Love you so much.
Love you, little booger. But yeah, so, like, I started with that and just going through, like, shelf by shelf. And then eventually I just got through all of downstairs. And the process of decluttering was making me feel better. Physically, and that's when I realized clutter makes me feel physically gross. I pulled out 30 pieces of clothing within 20 minutes, and it felt so great, but also in the back of my head I was like, do I have an addiction, or do I just don't have time right now? I just don't have the time, because I used to be in the habit of every 6 months I would clean out my closet. Like if I haven't worn something in 6 months, it's going bye-bye. It was a very hard and fast rule, because I, was trying to correct the path that was shown to me.
Course correct in real time.
Yeah, it feels so good. Like today we had a donation pickup, by the way, PSA, we're not sponsored. But if you're looking for a great place to donate besides Goodwill, you can look into your local VA. Ours doesn't take furniture. I don't know if it varies state by state or region by region, but you can donate your stuff there and they come and pick it up from your house.
Yeah, we just used our recycled Amazon boxes as boxes, so they can just take it. You just gotta label it VA and just have them scheduled to be picked up.
It made me think about this one time where I was trying to get my mom to declutter her house. And it was moving from their last house, and I was trying to help. Moving is such a golden opportunity to donate things or do an inventory of what you have and what you want to keep. And it would be literally crystal/glass figurines that were really popular in the 90s from the Dollar Tree. Some of them were broken and super glued back together, and I didn't really think anything of it. I just started tossing stuff, and I remember my mom coming over and being really upset with me. I was kind of taken aback, but I was trying to hear her out. And her thing was like, well, I don't want to get rid of that stuff. And I was like, but it's broken. And because I tossed it in the trash, it's even more broken now, to be honest. And her getting really genuinely mad at me for doing that. And then it escalated and it became like a whole blowout fight because I was like, what is this? And it wasn't until like a few months later, I started piecing together like, oh, I think that's addiction right there. And it's going down this pathway of hoarding. I brought the point up to her. I was like, when you die, who's going to deal with all of this?
A wonderful gift to give your children after you die.
Yeah.
Here's a whole project that you have to deal with. Look, we're not bagging on collectors or anything like that. Like, if you're into something, you're into something. By all means, do it. Great. Makes you happy. Awesome. And if that's the case, and you're a collector, you probably know your limits. But I feel like that's where things get gray for certain parents or the boomer generation. Not everything that you have is always a collector's item. Right?
Yeah, it's not precious.
It's not. And I don't think people like to hear that because people are very into their things.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a tangible thing. People feel like, oh, you don't like my tangible things, therefore you don't like me. And it's like, no.
I like you more than your tangible thing, actually.
Tagging their identity to these things and the accumulation. And it's like, the more I have, the better a person I am or whatever. Yeah. The weird twisted logic of understanding all that.
But again, like when you have unresolved trauma from growing up in poverty, like that doesn't make sense. You know, that's not a logical thing, unfortunately. And the concept that I was trying to share was, it's called Swedish death cleaning, which is decluttering in order to show your family that you love them, essentially. There's a much more elegant way to put it, but it's to make things easier for those that survive you. And I didn't realize that I was doing that since I was like 16. Because like I don't like the idea of stuff just to have stuff. That scares me. Like I remember last summer when we had cabinets and stuff installed in our garage. And this really lovely man came to our house. He measured the garage and then he said, okay, I'm going to send you a 3D rendering. And I'm thinking a couple cabinets here and there or whatever. This man, bless his heart, he sends a rendering and every inch of available wall was covered in cabinetry or storage space of some sort. And I remember when we had the meeting, he told me, he was like, oh, I'm really surprised that you don't just want to max out the storage space in the garage. And I looked at him and I told him, like, with all due respect, sir, like, it made me want to vomit. And it was because I know the more storage space you have, the easier it is to just buy things and throw in there. Like, you're not as intentional. And I say that as someone who grew up in a home where these freaking, you know, like the white Home Depot cabinets that you can buy and build, there was one after another just kept being added into our garage, or more shelving in the outdoor storage shed that me and my dad built. And it's like stuff, I kid you not, there were dinnerware sets in that storage from when my parents got married in the late 80s. Never used, still in the same box. We had survived like 3-4 moves at that point, but still there. And I don't even want to get close to living that type of life. So I don't do it. I think that's one thing about me that I've learned, like the second I become aware of like a habit or a tendency or something that I'm predisposed to, I keep a very close eye on it because I don't want to go down that path.
You physically tensed when you said hoarding. Oh my God, yeah. That was quite the physical reaction that you had. Yeah,
like there was a curio display cabinet thing in the garage. It just sat there empty for a while. There were like 3 in the guest bedroom. There was a whole china cabinet. The newer houses now, like you have the space between like the kitchen cabinet and the ceiling. Every inch of that was covered. I mean, it was just, oh my God. Like, and I remember after I moved out, right, we got engaged and we started living together and I was like unpacking my stuff from my room. I remember when we would go back to visit, dresser drawers, and now they're being filled with clothes that are not mine. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I don't live here anymore, whatever. But then I started looking and I was like, oh my God, like this is my mom's stuff. Like, where is it coming from? Where was it this entire time? I don't know if my parents hear this one day or not. I will also admit, once I started realizing that, I was just throwing things away. Every weekend we would go visit. and the thing is, they didn't realize it. No. They didn't know anything was missing because that's how much stuff there was. Yeah.
Compounding problems with shopping, and then the scarcity mindset, and then feeling it's like a status of some sort. You feel like you made it to a certain point, and then the concept of like, well, I can never get rid of these things.
I wonder, that last part that you just mentioned, I can never get rid of these things. If you had it for years and you haven't used it, I would want to know, like, is that more emotional or is that more scarcity mindset? You know, that's like feeding that thought.
Right. But another facade is them saying, well, it's just a collection. Well, let's figure out what the definition of a collection actually is.
Yeah.
Is it a collection of broken stuff? Because normally a collection is not broken. Yeah. A lot of ways that people with addiction will try to redefine what their habits are because they don't want to be labeled as someone with an addiction.
Yeah.
They don't want to think of it as a brain disorder. And I feel like that's the first step for a lot of people who do struggle with addiction is to recognize it for what it is. Right?
Acceptance, right? That's
acceptance.
It's really the first step. Yeah.
And I think that's why I asked the question, like, how do you distinguish coping from an addiction? Right?
Yeah. I mean, I would want to ask 20-something-year-old me that question too, like when I was going down that downward spiral and coping. Well, I mean, yeah, like, is it coping or was it addiction, like full-blown addiction at that point of alcohol for me? Yeah, because looking at me now, like, it doesn't matter how bad of a day I have, I don't care to drink. Like, I just don't. I think I try to have more mindful rituals of whether it's like reading or having a cup of tea or watching something that can actually boost my mood versus a quick, easy fix. And I wonder if that's another thing, like, when it comes to addiction that is born from trauma specifically, if folks had more access to hobbies or just healthier outlets, like, would addiction be what it was / what it is today?
If there were healthier outlets, would they be considered passions?
That is a fascinating question. That really is.
Okay. Well, honey, on that note, any second thoughts?
Initially, sometimes when you see someone struggling with something that can be labeled as a quote-unquote bad habit, give it a second thought and try to ask yourself, like, is it an addiction? Is it a coping mechanism? Even like if it's yourself, and understanding that it's a good thing and it's okay to want and need help in that moment, and that you're human, you know, and that you're loved and you're supported. How about you, hun? Any second thoughts?
Yeah, addiction can be very taboo when it comes to cultural and societal standards. But on second thought, it's real stuff that everyday people deal with. And whether or not you can be true to yourself about what it is, or if you're constantly living this double life. Yeah, it's hard. It's a true problem. It's sad. I can't really put it into any other words. And yeah, I just wish I was exposed to it a lot later in life.
Or never. Or ideal in an ideal world. Right?
Yeah. But everyone has a story. And I feel like people that have a hard time with addiction wish that they weren't addicted.
I don't think anyone ever would want to choose that for themselves knowingly. I don't believe that, yeah.
But sometimes when they double down on their behaviors and their choices, it seems like it. Yeah. And I think that's a really hard part. And so on second thought, it's about having a lot more empathy and patience than you would normally be required for any other sort of circumstance.
I heavily agree. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story.
Likewise.
Thank you, of course. And if you're not already, please give us a follow on Instagram at firstgensecondthoughts. And of course, as always, we would love to hear from you at firstgensecondthoughts@gmail.com. And if you have any questions that we can answer during a podcast or even topic recommendations, send them through. And on that note, we'll see you next time.
We love you and we're proud of you, Beta. Peace. Bye.